Good evening, everyone. We are now about to begin our event, so I request you all to please put your phones on silent mode. Thank you. I believe, I believe that education is key to every woman's liberation. These are the words of India's first female teacher, Savitribai Phule. I am Rajalakshmi Deshmukh, research intern at Pune International Center. We wish to welcome you all for the inspiring launch of this biography of great social reformer Savitribai Phule by Ms. Reeta Ramamurthy Gupta. We are also very delighted to have with us Mr. Suresh Pingale, Trustee of PIC and President Equal Opportunities Foundation as the chair for today's session. Our director, Mr. Abhay Vaidya, will be in conversation with Ms. Gupta. The book tells the unsung narrative of our shared past and serves as a reminder to future generations of the challenges and struggles endured by these reformers and visionaries in their effort to make this world a better place. Savitribai Phule, India's first female teacher, and her forgotten compatriots, Fatima Sheikh and Sagunabai Shirsagar, battled not just for women's education but also for the emancipation of widows, untouchables, and backward castes. The author of this book, Ms. Reeta Ramamurthy Gupta, is a prolific biographer and reviewer for CNBC TV 18. She has also authored a biography on a legendary actor, Sanjeev Kumar. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today. Mr. Suresh Pingale is an agriculturalist and trustee at Pune International Center. He is also the Chief Honorary Secretary of the Empress Botanical Garden, Pune, and President of the Equal Opportunities Foundation. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Pune International Center regularly holds book discussions, conversations, and lectures on a variety of topics. We have had wonderful sessions in the past with eminent authors and scholars such as Dr. Sanjaya Baru, Professor Suhas Parshikar, Girish Kuber, and Ambassador Pawan Verma. This promises to be one such session. I would like to mention briefly that our think tank, Pune International Center, is now in its 13th year and works in the areas of national security, energy, environment and climate change, social innovation, technology, and national innovation ecosystem. You are welcome to visit our website puneinternationalcenter.org and know more about PIC. We will first have the opening remarks by Mr. Pingale, followed by ceremonial release of the book, and then a conversation with author. This would be followed by a question and answer segment, and you all are welcome to ask questions. May I now hand over the floor to Mr. Suresh Pingale.
Good evening, everybody. Reeta ji is a lexical architect. I didn't know what this word means, but it reminded me, President of Maharashtra Sahitya Parishad once upon a time said in Marathi, Shabda Prabhu. So that is probably is the proper Marathi karan. I think so. I'm very happy that this event is happening in Pune because Pune is the place where Savitribai spent her life, entire life, barring the 9 years which she has spent in Naigaon. She was here, she joined her husband, she was illiterate. I think details she'll tell. I need not go into the details. But she is really not known outside of Maharashtra. So I'm very grateful to you that this English book will give greater information about the lady who started female education. Only probably thanks to Kashiram and Mayawati, she is known in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar also. But in other states, she is not known. So she should be congratulated for writing about her in English. I think there are only 2 books in Marathi on Savitribai. One is by Hari Narke, the other one is Mr. Murudkar.
M.G. Mali
also, yes. Yes. But there is no books on Fatima B. Sheikh, the teacher, the helper who started this female education in Pune with the help of couple Phule, Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule. But one person, Mr. Dinkar Rao Kakde, if you have heard him, he has written a book, small book, on Fatima B and also Usman Sheikh. So I'm very happy to be associated, and I must thank Abhay and the management of the PIC that the Equal Opportunity Foundation has been associated with this today's event. This small trust that we have formed with our friends. One of the trustee, Mr. Supnekar, is also here, and we try to help young students coming from Adivasi, Dalit, and minority communities. We help them in purchase of books, their fees, or maybe clothes. So I think with this, you have given me 2 minutes. I have passed that 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
We'll now have the ceremonial release of the book. May I request Dr. Mashelkar and Dr. Kelkar to please come on the stage. So before we begin the conversation, सर्वप्रथम क्रांतिज्योती सावित्रीबाई फुले यांना नमन करून मी आमच्या संवादाला सुरू करतो. So I am Abhay Vaidya, Director, Pune International Center. I am an alumnus of Pune University, which as recently as 2014, 117 years after Savitribai Phule's death, changed its name to SPPU, Savitribai Phule Pune University. So this book by Reeta Ramamurthy Gupta is a fascinating read. It at once reminded me of Dr. Narendra Jadhav's book Untouchables. Coming from a Mahar family, his father was a rail worker at Bombay Port Trust. And his father was so much inspired by Baba Saheb Ambedkar that his single mission was to educate his children. And that is how Dr. Narendra Jadhav, former Vice Chancellor of Pune University, Executive Director of RBI, and Member of Parliament, rose to great heights. Ambedkar had three gurus, Buddha, Kabir, and Jyotiba Phule. So we all know the miraculous and transformative power of education. And it is even more miraculous and even more transformative when education is imparted to the girl child. So this book is the story of Savitribai Phule and her childhood friend Fatima Sheikh, which Mr. Supnekar just mentioned. And she is perhaps the first female Muslim teacher of India. The third person who assisted Savitribai Phule was Saguna Shirsagar, who brought up Jyotiba. We will hear, of course, more from the author. The promotion of education by the British and the missionaries played a very critical role in this major social reform. And Savitribai Phule's story is also a story of social harmony at the grassroots, where Fatima Sheikh and her brother Usman sheltered the Phules when they were asked to leave their house due to opposition from the Brahmins of Pune. So, ma'am, I would like to start with you. The first question, you wrote the biography of Sanjeev Kumar, of the great actor Sanjeev Kumar, and now you have a book on Savitribai Phule. So, what was the inspiration and how did you begin?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm feeling very humbled to sit in front of Dr. Mashelkar. I don't know what I'm going to say. Thank you, sir. My daughter asked me, why are you writing the biographies of men only? Why Sanjeev Kumar? Why Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra? She asked me, why are you not writing biographies of women? And then I researched that as biographies go, there are fewer biographies of women and there are fewer biographies of women written by women. And men are not really writing biographies of women either. There is a recent one, Jennifer Duoden's biography, The Gene Cracker, by one of the greatest biographers of our time. But otherwise, this entire biography of females is something that's a missing link in the history of documentation, I would like to say. And then when I wanted to write about women, I thought about who better than the woman because of whom I can write. Savitribai Phule. And I hope to write many more biographies of women along the way. But it had to start here, sir.
Okay. So the saying is that behind every successful man there is a woman. And here we have a story of men like Jyotiba Phule, Usman Sheikh, and Savitribai's father, Kandoji Nevese Patil, standing solidly behind the women in their lives. So these were the three women, Savitribai Phule herself, Fatima Sheikh, and Saguna Shirsakar. So ma'am, tell us something about these three women.
Certainly. So there was this photograph I saw. This whole journey started because of this photograph. I'm just going to show it to all of you. This is called Part 1, The Spark, this picture. So this is a photograph I saw which began my quest to know more about the women in the picture. This was published in 1910 in Majur newspaper. And I knew one of them was Savitribai Phule, and I knew that there were children sitting below. It's like, who are the other two women? So over a period of time, I would like to credit Professor Ganesh Raut, who's sitting there. He helped me understand the history of who Fatima Sheikh really was. Shamsuddin Tamboli sir helped me understand it better as well. Fatima and Savitri met at a school, at a normal school. They used to be called normal schools. They were run at that time. Normal wasn't an adjective as we know it today. Normal as a noun. A normal school was a preparatory school where you could get primary education. So they met there. And Fatima, by nature and by all accounts, was a very happy, talkative person. So she made friends with Savitribai Phule. And eventually, when Savitribai Phule wanted to go and study under Cynthia Farrar, the missionary, and become a teacher, she told Fatima, why don't you come along with me? So it was Savitri who took Fatima on this journey to Nagar, where Cynthia Farrar, a missionary, an American missionary, taught them. I think the greatness of Cynthia Farrar, the fourth actor in the story, is that for her, conversion was not the agenda, and it is expressly stated in multiple texts. She just wanted to ensure that as many people become teachers as possible. So Fatima and Savitri became teachers together. But Fatima's brother Usman ran a textile business, and Fatima used to go from home to home to the Mem Sahibs, offering them embroideries, offering them garments to be stitched for the social calendar of Pune, which was very hectic at that time. So we have a reference to the social calendar of the Mem Sahibs in Pune as well. And how Fatima was extremely engrossed and very familiar with all of them. Finally, when they found a place in Bidewada to start the school, Savitri could not think of anyone other than Fatima to start the school with her because A, no one else knew enough to teach at the time. So Cynthia Farrar's first batch was just 7 people. And out of that, there were just Savitri and Fatima who were from this place. There were others who were missionaries. So when we speak of Savitribai Phule, we as India's first lady teacher, we put one qualification: India's first non-missionary lady teacher. Because before her there was Gangabai, and that was 1824. She was the first missionary teacher who started a school for girls. So this is about Savitri and Fatima and their friendship. Sagunabai was a widow. She was Jyotirau's father, Govindrao's cousin sister in a sense. And when Chimnabai died, Chimnabai is Jyotirau's mother, Sagunabai was available to take care of Jyotirao, and Govindrao, Jyotirau's father, approached her. Why don't you take care of Jyotirao? Around that time, Sagunabai was working in Father John's house. Father John and his wife Mary were missionaries. And they had rescued Sagunabai in a sense because she was a widow and she was going to be subjected to the normal rituals that widows were subjected to at the time. So he invited her. You can stay with me, you and Mary, and you can take care of our house and you can take care of our son. Sagunabai was growing around all kinds of English literature. This is the beauty of it. She had access to Thomas Paine. She had access to George Washington because 1776, after the American independence, and 1791, when Thomas Paine wrote Rights of Man, these books had started becoming available in the houses of missionaries. So Sagunabai, who knew basic literacy, she was highly aware, highly informed, highly educated as compared to any other woman of that time. So she is making Jyotiba more aware of the rights of human beings as Savitribai's mother-in-law figure or mentor figure. She is making her aware and she is inspiring all of them to continue the work. So Sagunabai's work is pivotal in this. And for some reason, Sagunabai and Fatima Sheikh, of course, because they never wrote anything or they never got portraits done. Why don't we have evidence? We don't have evidence of people who don't write or get portraits done. It's as simple as that. Neither of them did that. So this is really the three of them. And from education for the few to education for all, this shift happened because of the three of them.
So this is a very important point that you make, that the school started by Savitribai Phule was the first non-missionary school, and she was the first non-missionary to open a girls' school in India. One important point that comes across through the book is the enormous contribution made by the British Raj, the education policy of the British, because they needed a administrative staff at the lower level. The missionaries and the wives of British officers who helped social reformers. They helped stop the practice of sati, and in their role in bringing modern education to India. Could you elaborate on this, please?
So, as you know, whenever a revolution happens, there is a mix of things that comes together. It's never just one thing. A conducive environment is created, and it's not always that the main actors are creating that. Sometimes some of the forces are beyond your control. Like I spoke about the American independence movement and books coming to India at that time. Thomas Paine's Rights of Man. What were the two teachings? Very simple. All people are equal and you don't need an intermediary to worship God. So this makes Jyotirao wonder, Savitribai wonder. What are the Brahmins talking about then? If you don't need an intermediary to worship God, if I can worship my God in my own way, then what are all these rituals that people are talking about? So one is this American freedom struggle. Second is the Charter Act of 1813 that allowed missionaries to come in. Now suddenly you have people who are going around teaching everyone, willing to make people literate, because that is their primary role, other than the stated goal of conversion, which they never hid. But even among them, There were a few that were not looking to convert, they were just looking to teach. The third thing, you mentioned Savitribai's father, Khandoji. Khandoji, as a father, he did a Janmotsav when Savitribai was born in those times. And you never do a Janmotsav in those times when a daughter is born. A Janmotsav is reserved for the birth of a son. So he planted a tree because his mother, Savitribai's Aji, did not want any Janmotsav done. She said, "You've gone crazy." But he said, "No, I will celebrate it in my own way." So he did the Janmotsav by planting a tree. His faith in Savitribai, that she was meant for greater things. Sagunabai's matchmaking skills. She was the one who decided that only Savitribai and Jyotirao are appropriate for each other because both are crazy. And she knew that both of them were crazy because she had interacted with them. So her matchmaking skills. So I am talking about a confluence of circumstances here. Not all of which completely controlled by Savitribai or Sagunabai or Fatima Sheikh. And of course, I think the last thing is that the British did not want to really invest in educating the Indians. That is why they wanted to bring the missionaries in. They didn't want to invest, but they wanted cheaper labor. So in whatever little way they could, they aided the process along a little bit by not stopping it. So the Brahmins realized that we have too many people right now who are wanting to make change happen. So I think this is a mix of forces because this is nothing short of a revolution. 1848, less than 100 years later, we have independence. How did the idea of nationhood come about? How can you discuss ideas if you can't talk about ideas? So I am saying, sir, with due respect, that Savitribai's work was not just limited to education. It was unlimited to seeding the idea of nationhood, allowing people to think in terms of democracy, allowing people to think in terms of equal rights, allowing people to come together, congregate, plan, assess, fight for the ideas of freedom, justice, and liberty. That is the contribution of this lady.
You mentioned Thomas Paine's Rights of Man, and this is a book that influenced Jyotiba Phule to a great extent. Along with he was well versed in English, and he came. His surname is Phule, so they were traders in flowers, and the flowers were supplied to the Peshwas and to the temples, and there was so much of pressure put on the Phule on Jyotiba's father that Jyotiba and his wife had to leave the house. The father had to ask them to leave the house. And Jyotiba, who his wife would call Shetji, later became a civil contractor. And some of the properties, some of the big projects in Pune, like the Yerauda Dam, etc., they were constructed. He provided a lot of civil material for that construction. Now, this episode of they leaving the house and then they being given shelter by Fatima and Usman, and then starting a new life again. Tell us something about this.
So this is one line of history that was known about Fatima Sheikh. Interestingly, in 2021, Google on 9th of January had a doodle celebrating Fatima Sheikh. Her work is known, but we knew only one line about it. And the books that you mentioned, sir, earlier, they also need to come into the limelight. But as I spoke to people, historians, to understand what could have been the Milo of that time, what could have been the considerations, Fatima Sheikh was married off. There is a theory that she was married off when she was in Agra. They are originally from Agra. Now there are books available. They are called the Julaha migration to Malegaon. It is one of the big migrations of that time. So the Julahas, that is the weaver community that Fatima and Usman belong to, they come to know that in Calcutta, the hands of the weavers are being cut off, the fingers of the weavers. And the same British Raj is now coming to Agra. And there is famine in Agra. They feared the worst, and the entire community, without any trains, without any conveyance at the time, in whatever means possible, bullock cart, they moved to Malegaon, the famous Julaha migration. Now, the person whom Fatima was vowed to in marriage never came to collect her. Because we all know that in those days, at 8 years, 9 years, the marriage would already be happening and the woman would already be spoken for. But nobody came to collect Fatima. Now, Usman Sheikh, her brother, he never marries either. Because he thinks that this will upset the balance of power in my house. Fatima, who is so intelligent, she knows Arabic, she knows Persian, she knows weaving. She will have no place in my own house if I get married. So, Usman and Fatima, this relationship is extremely special and must be studied, to my mind. Now, from Malegaon, again because of infestation, that was another major crisis in Malegaon at the time, they shift to Pune. Pune, they get support from Ghaffar Beg, Munshi Ghaffar Beg, who gives them a house, who sets them up. And Usman, who has seen so many problems in his life, he is determined that I will make something of myself. So, by the time Jyotirao and Savitri meet them and come to their house, Usman and Fatima are very successful in the cloth business. So, they are traders, they are weavers, they are interacting with society, the British society at the time, they are getting orders. So, it was possible for Usman and Fatima, economically as well, to support Jyotirao and Savitri. This is very important. They also helped them in every way to set up the schools. So this entire interaction has an economic angle. In fact, Jyotirao becoming practical in life had a lot to do with his friendship with Usman. He realized that without economic assistance, he couldn't really meet his ideals. So I think these are the important influences that I would like to mention in this context.
Right. So the social harmony of India at the grassroots, I keep coming back to this theme, is seen very strongly in the life of Jyotiba Phule and their friendship with Fatima. And this is what really is at the grassroots, and this is so relevant for us today. Now, one episode that is mentioned in the book is the story of Dr. Vishram Ramji Ghole, whose daughter was poisoned and killed by the Brahmins because she was going to school, or she wanted to go to school. When the school was started by Fatima and Savitribai, cow dung was routinely thrown on Fatima. And even Savitribai had to go with two male accompaniments to ward off attacks on her. Tell us about the challenges that they faced.
May I read a small section? Because I think this was very important to establish. Walk with me into the 19th century Maratha Confederacy. Peshwai, a local term for Peshwa rule, was over by 1818. But the hangover remained. Brahmins who had entrenched themselves in powerful positions in the Peshwai governance continued to dictate social conduct even as the British consolidated their rule. Society was built on the Chaturvarna caste system comprising Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. Lower than the Shudras were Atishudras and both were mistreated in many ways. The Brahmins considered it bad luck if they came across a Shudra in the morning. Hence, the Shudras were only allowed to come out of their homes at prescribed times. The footprints of the Shudras on the road couldn't be seen by Brahmins. The soil contaminated by their passage had to be covered by another layer of soil. So they were forced to tie tahalya, branches, to their waist, with which they would sweep the path behind them as they walked. So a Shudra is sweeping as he's walking, so that the Brahmin can walk. Further, a pot was tied to their necks, so that the saliva wouldn't drop on the road. They also had to tie a black thread around their necks so that they could be identified from a distance readily. If a Shudra came across a Brahmin, they had to quickly sit down so their impure shadow wouldn't fall on the Brahmin. Shudras also had to carry a bell with them while walking on the street to forewarn others of higher caste and give the latter chance to change their path. The state of women was worse. Birth as a woman meant a miserable existence. A man was allowed any number of marriages, and that too with younger girls. At the age of 60, Bajirao Peshwa II, the 13th and last Maratha ruler, married a girl who was only 9 years old. Needless to say, these girls would get widowed early. Their heads were shaved and they were forced to lead an ascetic life. Funnily enough, the restrictions on women conferred a pious and reputable status to the family. Women were expected to stay behind the parda, not come in front of men, laugh or talk loudly, or even wear footwear in front of men. There were reports that women from the lower castes were forced to dance for Brahmin men, and their status was pronounced as worse than animals. Widows would get raped, they would then get shamed into suicide. In fact, one of these was adopted by Jyotirao and Savitri later, a child of a raped Brahmin widow. Can you believe that this was our world less than 200 years ago? The story of Savitribai Phule is set in this time, and that is why it is important.
Yeah, so the book brings out life in 19th century India very graphically and very vividly. And the style is narrative. So it's more like you are reading through a story as the story of Savitribai Phule is related to us. One last question from me before we open the floor to questions. So, January 1, 1848, the school was opened in Bhidewada with 6 students. And ironically, the space was given by Tatya Sahib Bide, a Brahmin. So, there were a number of Brahmins also who supported Jyotiba and Savitribai in their work. The Phules went on to open 18 schools after that. So, please elaborate on it.
You know, that's really the most interesting thing, because even Sadashiv Ballal Govande, there were so many Brahmins who supported them. So this narrative that all Brahmins were bad, or this narrative that all of any kind of people are bad, is obviously not sustainable. Yes, there were some who were myopic and who feared and who only knew how to rule by propagating that fear. So those were the bad actors at the time. Saraswati Govande, Sadashiv Ballal Govande's wife, again Brahmins, they were the first to get educated. She was one of the first to get educated after Savitri and Fatima, to join them as teachers in their revolution. There were many Brahmins who helped. And more than anything else, the entire movement could not have succeeded without the tacit participation of many Brahmins. Because even though they did not come forward and oppose, they did not, even though they did not come forward and support, they did not oppose either. So one can imagine that for any of these movements to actually take root, there would be so much groundswell required. And so many Brahmins had their tacit support. So even later when the Dakshina committee, the Dakshina fund, the award that used to be given for Brahmins, Jyotiba tapped into that for his schools. And many Brahmins supported him in that. They said, because the Dakshina fund traditionally was used only to fund Brahmins and their pursuit of a certain subject, mastery over a certain subject. Now, in the absence of other funds, Jyotiba had to tap into that. All of this happened because of the support of the Brahmins.
Yeah. We can now have questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll send across the microphone.
Reeta madam, I can understand your efforts and struggle while writing all these things in your book.
Thank you, sir.
You have rightly mentioned Savitri, Fatima, and Saguna. You have also mentioned in your book about their product, that is Mukta Salve. We would like to know about Mukta Salve.
In fact, Mukta Salve was a student of Savitribai and Fatima Sheikh, and she wrote a scathing essay on what we just read out, the bewildering Brahmins of Pune. She wrote a scathing essay. If I may read out one paragraph of that, please permit me. Essay by Mukta Salve, female student of Fatima and Savitri, titled Mang Maharcha Dukha Vishayi. So I've translated this into English, this essay. It humbles me to realize that God has filled the heart of an untouchable girl like me, considered to be even lower than an animal, with the pain and suffering of my people, the Mahars and Mangs. The creator of all beings has put this in my heart, and while invoking his name, I dare to pen this essay with the strength I have now received. So she's talking about the strength of education she has now received. Because education was a luxury back then, it was not a given. The creator is the one who created the Mangs, the Mahars, and also the Brahmins. And he is the one who is filling me with wisdom to write. He will bless my labor with a fruitful outcome. If we attempt to refute on the basis of the Vedas the argument of these gluttonous Brahmins who hate us and consider themselves vastly superior, they say that the Vedas are their own domain, their exclusive property. Now, apparently, if the Vedas are only for the Brahmins, they are obviously not for us. If the Vedas belong only to the Brahmins, then it is an open secret that we do not have this book. We are without the book, so we are without any religion. If the Vedas are for the Brahmins only, then we are not bound to act according to the Vedas. So she's questioning if merely looking at the Vedas can get us into grievous sins, as the Brahmins claim, then would not following them be the height of foolishness? Muslims lead their life according to the Quran. English people follow their Bible, and Brahmins have their Vedas. Because they all have their own good or bad religion that they follow, they are somewhat happier than us who are without any religion. Oh God, please tell us what is our religion. Teach us, oh God, your true religion so that we all can lead our lives according to it. So it's a very beautiful essay. A young child. And, many years later, in front of the Education Commission that sat in 1884, students of Savitri and Fatima came as experts on the education policy at the time. So there are some references. One lady named Chowdar, she was there, physically present, it is documented. The spark that was lit by these three women, we do not actually know where all the children went. And I tried a lot to track many of the children. What happened to the 18 schools they started? A lot of them I have described in the book. But when funds dried up in 1857 after the uprising, some schools were shut down. And some of them were taken over by the British government. Some of them were run privately. But the girls that were taught by them traveled all over the country. And I wish that there will be some essay or something that I can write in the future that tracks the lives of each of these girls and what they did. There is not much evidence available, and that is my one regret as I finished this book. Yes, sir. Sir, you have to tell us something about Tarabai Shinde.
No, I'm not going to talk to you about Tarabai Shinde, but I'll tell you the female education, even despite the school which started in 1848, there was great opposition to female education. after this first school was started, family school in Pune, after 36 years, there was a efforts by some people, including Justice Ranade and Bhandarkar, to start a new school for girls. That was Huzurpaga. And it was opposed by the leaders of those days in Pune, mainly Lokmanya Tilak. But you tell something about that Balhatya Pratibandhak Graha.
So, the good thing about Savitribai's work, Bal Hatya Pratibandha, Mahila Seva Mandal, she never stopped. The beauty is that they would just keep taking up newer and newer and newer challenges. So, why did they start Bal Hatya Pratibandha and why did they start Mahila Seva Mandal? I'll share a small story behind it. Yes, of course. So, why did they do all of this? When Savitribai and Fatima finished their education at Cynthia Farrar's mission, a lot of their own people, and especially spread by Brahmins there, they have been taught by outsiders. Have they also become outsiders? Are they still our own? This was a very important narrative at the time. Why have they learnt from missionaries? And if they come and teach us, will they also be like the missionaries? It's a very subtle emotion that is described in many books at the time. Now, Savitribai recognizes this because she's going from home to home, asking people to send their girls to school. And she's facing resistance. So, when she faces this resistance, she understands that this is a layer to that resistance. I am being seen as an outsider, not as theirs. So, she does this Haldi Kunku ceremony, and she does many of those. And she writes poetry. Saraswati Govande conducts many sessions reading out her poetry to people. Savitribai is one of us. This Haldi Kunku, she is one of us. So this Savitribai's understanding of what brings people together was very acute. There was no reason for her to mix this ceremony with education, with Mahila Seva, with infanticide homes. But because she was able to talk to more and more women, so you have to understand, it's not like we are sitting here today. We all know that. It was difficult for her to gather people in one place and talk to them. Because she's seen as this, she has nuisance value in the eyes of Brahmins, right? She has fair amount of nuisance value. So how does she congregate people? So she did all of these innovative things to bring people together, to move from cause to cause to cause without any loss of enthusiasm. And so many things. We know about the Satya Shodhak Samaj that they started. So they used to start something, hand it over to someone else to run, and then start the next thing. They never stopped. And they never wanted credit for what they did, because they wanted to keep moving. So Fatima Sheikh's important because she became the principal of the schools eventually. It wasn't Savitribai. She was the initial principal. But then Fatima Sheikh started running all those schools because Savitribai had moved on to the next thing.
Good evening, ma'am. You have very thought-provoking cover picture for your book. So, does those colors represent something like orange for Savitribai or green for Fatima and maybe white for some Christian lady? And about those children sitting at the downs. Can you please
I hope you
elaborate
can
on
see
that?
India on the cover. So in fact, I requested these colors specifically. I said, I want India on the cover of my book. And my publisher, HarperCollins, kindly obliged. And I must really thank HarperCollins for believing in this book. Because, you know, the entire story, I must share this with you. When I was coming to Pune, next to me, a medical student from Jammu. She was an MBBS. She just finished her MBBS in Jammu. And she was talking about education in Jammu to me. And I had this book in my hand. And she said, "It's a 3.5 hour journey. Do you mind if I read your book?" I said, "Please." And she finished the book in 3.5 hours. So this, it's written exceedingly simply. And for me, that was a validation that youngsters would like it and that they would be able to finish it quickly without reaching out for the dictionary at any point in time. It's that simple. And yes, the children in blue is, of course, the Ashok Chakra. That's why we had to integrate some blue over there. Those days, widows used to wear white. That is why Sagunabai is white. And Fatima is in green because that was the only color missing from the flag.
So thank you, ma'am, for being here. And as you very well said, youngster would really collaborate with this book, and we would really read it quickly. Ma'am, talking about Savitribai Phule, the first thing comes in front of our eyes is like today feminism, I would say. And nowadays, we can see there are lots of things going around, like I would say the Manipur thing, if you say. And also, there are politicians who I would say are the base of every country who tend to mislead the history by commenting wrong things. So, as you have wrote a book, and I assume that when we write or when we, even though acting, we tend to get in ourselves, that we tend to assume that I would have been on the place, so what would I have done? So my question is, if Savitribai Phule was there in today's era, present era, what would be the vision of Savitribai Phule's for the proceeding that are happening at current?
What a wonderful question. I think she would have continued to relentlessly pursue good. Because good has more power. I think we have the very eminent Mashelkar sir here who will tell us about the power of continuing good work for 60 years, 70 years and reaping the benefits of that. When you become identified with good, you have a voice. It is very easy to sit outside and comment on things which we don't fully understand perhaps. See, this is also a slice of history, Indian history. I have tried to present a slice of Indian history. But when people continue to act on their conviction, first you have to have a conviction that this is what I want to do. This is the change I want to be. And then you have to pursue that path, and you will be surprised how much momentum you gather. It is just that people perhaps give up too soon. They go a little bit farther and they don't see anything moving, so sometimes they step back. But go the whole hog. Savitribai never stopped at starting schools. She went home to home asking people to send their schools. She did Mahila Seva Mandal. She tried to rescue the raped widows. She tried to rescue them from infanticide. So there is a path. You have to find your purpose and stay fixed on that path. And eventually, people with the same energy will join you and make the revolution happen. Somewhere during the discussion, if you remember, I said that you don't actually do everything. For example, you don't make the sun rise. Did you make the sun rise this morning? Have you circulated oxygen in this room for us to breathe? There is so much that is done for us. Can we just do what is ours to do? What is our conviction? And I think the world will be a better place if we follow our conviction.
First of all, it's been a great pleasure to hear you, Reeta. She's an old school friend of mine, so it's really exciting. What I really felt was thought-provoking in some of the discussions so far, and I found a parallel in my life today, is that you mentioned that Savitribai Phule's father did the Janmotsav for her, right? He went against the social norms of that time.
The other thing is the matchmaking of Savitribai and Jyotiba. What I see a great parallel in today's women's life. So I am a scientist here, and I mentor a lot of PhD students. And the students who eventually finish their PhD and they go on ahead to have successful careers, they are the ones who have had the motivation from their parents, and especially their fathers have been a supportive force. And people who get married to the right life partner eventually end up being very successful. Now, with these two examples, one from, more than a century ago, and the current scenario, in a progressive world, a supposedly progressive world, uh, what are your insights from researching Savitribai's life that would, we can't change sociocultural norms overnight. Things have been changing over the decades. But what are your insights into bringing gender equity and equality based on, all the readings and the research and the contextualization that you've done to get to this book?
Thank you so much, Anuradha. Such a pleasure to see you. Uh, when I sent copies of this book out to some young female actresses in Bombay, they used a word which I will repeat here with the permission of the elders. They said, "Wasn't she really badass?" So I said, "Okay, she is." And they said, "She is the OG badass feminist." So I said, "Okay, interesting point of view, because one wouldn't connect that word to it's a more informal lingo these days to call someone that." I think with respect to Savitribai and Jyotiba's partnership, the matchmaking that Sagunabai did, there's an incident that's mentioned in the book that a lot of elders gathered one day and told Jyotirao, "You don't have a child? So many years you've been married, you don't have a child?" So Jyotirao said that, we have been busy with the work that we are doing, and we never thought of this. And the elders continue, "Maybe it is her problem. So why don't you get married again?" Jyotirao says, "What if it is my problem? So I will get married again if she gets married again." So this is, how evolved the confluence of circumstances that I keep talking about, that one person does not make a revolution. So many mindsets come together to make revolutions happen. I think Jyotiba and Savitri were equals. They treated themselves as equals. And I have a chapter called Savitribai the Wife, in which she is counseling Jyotiba. He had an ideological conflict with the Brahmins on account of what we already know. But because they had separated him from his father, he had developed a personal conflict as well. Having an ideological conflict is different from personal enmity. We understand that. So he said, "I'm not going to teach anymore. I'm going to leave all these things." Savitribai said, "No, you cannot be so myopic. Because of you, there are so many teachers who are now teaching. Men have taught their wives. They are all looking at you. You don't teach the whole day. Teach 2 hours a day, but you have to continue teaching." So at every step, Savitri the wife counseled Jyotiba the husband as well. So this story is about Savitribai as a daughter, as a teacher, as a wife, and as a poet, which I think you will enjoy more. But there is evidence to suggest that she wrote poetry 30 years before Keshav Sut. That is something to think about. So this entire, equation between the two is very exciting. And I think that because they respected each other, They never felt that, oh, our family is not complete. The whole of India was their family.
But one of my friend who is not well, a friend of mine who is not well, and who attended the Rotary meeting where she addressed, has sent a small note for her. Can I read it with your permission? सावित्री के किरदार को इतिहास से निकाल कर रीटा आई। धन भागी है हमें मिले सावित्री विरासत में और रीटा समक्ष पाकर। एक समाज सुधारक, एक शिक्षा परिषद और एक कवि से करा रही है पहचान। रीटा इस प्रयास से करे कितने व्याख्यान। तमन्ना मेरी खूब पाओ तुम सम्मान।
So I shall now request the chair for today's event, Mr. Suresh Pingale, to please give his concluding remarks. I should mention that the idea of Pune International Center took birth 13 years ago at a gathering that he had organized. And I would also like to mention that I spoke of Dr. Narendra Jadhav earlier. He is a trustee of Pune International Center. And PIC conducts a whole lot of book discussions, conferences, conversations on various subjects. You are most welcome to be associated with PIC. It's a public trust, and all the information is there on our website. I shall now request Mr. Pingale to please give his concluding.
I don't think I'll say anything more after this wonderful speech on the Savitribai. I think you are physically and mentally and emotionally involved with Savitribai's work. I can only one request I can make you, that you must write one book on Fatima, and the other one is Tarabai. Tarabai is also disciple of Savitribai. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank ma'am for this vivid conversation and sharing such unknown and undiscovered facts about these three amazing ladies. And truly, this is a fearless saga of India's first teacher and her forgotten allies. On behalf of Pune International Center, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for gracing this occasion with your presence and this at the significant book launch that is celebrating the life of the remarkable Savitribai Phule. Our gratitude extends to the author of this book, Ms. Gupta, for her meticulous research and dedication in bringing forth a comprehensive portrayal of Savitribai's life. Your book is sure to serve as a guiding source for anyone to delve deeper into the legacy of these extraordinary women. We are immensely thankful for Mr. Suresh Pingale for being with us today and chairing this event. And thank you, sir, for your invaluable insights. I would also like to thank the audience. This event wouldn't have been as meaningful without your presence. Last but not the least, a sincere thanks to the organizing team for the smooth execution of this event. As we conclude, we should remember that Savitribai Phule's teachings continue to guide us towards a more equal and just society. Let her memory motivate us to advocate for education, to empower the downtrodden, and to question the standards that perpetuate inequality. And I would like to say that every woman present here and every woman out there would totally agree that we have progressed because they fought for us. Thank you everyone for joining us today.